Brought to you by Penguin.
The War Against the BBC by Patrick Barwise and Peter York. Read by Neil Gardner. Chapter 1. What, exactly, is the BBC? The BBC was launched in October 1922 as a private business, the British Broadcasting Company, by a consortium of radio manufacturers. Its commercial role, as the only UK broadcaster licensed by the General Post Office, GPO, which was responsible at that time for regulating the airwaves, was to drive consumer purchases of radios. In December 1922, the BBC, astonishingly, appointed as its general manager 33-year-old Captain John Reith, a charismatic, 6'6" tall Scottish Presbyterian conservative with virtually no relevant experience but limitless self-belief, as he doubtless made clear at the interview. The gamble paid off. Reith led the BBC until 1938, and it is still recognisably his creation. In particular, it was Reith who determined that its overall mission, even as a private company, should be public service, using its programmes to inform, educate, and entertain its audiences. This remains its mission today. The initial funding for the service was provided from a royalty on the sale of radio sets from the 6 manufacturers in the consortium, but this proved insufficient, as many listeners used unlicensed or homemade radios, and was soon replaced by an annual radio license fee paid over the counter at post offices, broadly similar to today's TV license fee. Any household with a working radio was legally required to have a license. Almost everything about the BBC, its funding, its scope, and the nature and social and political effects of its programming, has always been contested right from the start. For instance, concerns about its market impact go back to its foundation. To protect newspapers' revenue, it was banned from selling radio advertising and from presenting any news bulletins before 7 p.m. Initially, it was even required to source all its news from commercial wire services, rather than setting up its own news-gathering operation. In line with its mission, the BBC's programming was strongly skewed towards high culture. Reith believed that part of its role was to develop its listeners' tastes by offering them programmes slightly more demanding than they would have listened to if they'd had a choice. Even after the First World War, British society was still sufficiently deferential for this paternalistic approach to have been largely uncontroversial, although there was, as there always will be, a tension between challenging the audience and maximising the number of listeners, or viewers, by giving them less demanding fare. 1927. The British Broadcasting Corporation. On the 1st of January 1927, the BBC became, as it still remains, the British Broadcasting Corporation, a statutory public corporation with a royal charter, and therefore independent from direct government interference. Although, as with all public institutions, especially public broadcasters, its relationship with the government and politicians is inherently problematic, as we'll discuss shortly. The BBC Charter is reviewed every 10 years or so. Under the current one, which runs from the 1st of January 2017 until the 31st of December 2027, the BBC is governed by the BBC Board and regulated by the communications regulator Ofcom. Has 5 non-commercial divisions: content, TV channels and programmes, radio and education, news and current affairs, including BBC Global News, nations and regions, and a group covering digital technology and services and functions such as research and development, finance, HR, and property. Has 3 commercial divisions: BBC Studios, TV production and international commercial activities, BBC.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?